the state of Israel itself is comprised of different ideological people groups, all of whom claim to be Jewish, but assert that identity on different definitions. They don't necessarily all have the same definition, but there is, a state rabbinate. And the general rule is if your mom was Jewish, you're Jewish, right?
Yep.
But these are traditions of men applied to try to keep a sense of an identity over the last, 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple, in exile, under different persecutions, under having forced migrations and stuff like that, and diaspora, real problematic. But God promised that there would always be Israel. Like, God protects Israel, without respect of whether they, as a whole, believe in Yeshua or not. I also believe that within the larger group that we would call Israel, there are faithful believers in Yeshua, every generation.
Right.
And perhaps, I don't know, I'm speculating, but perhaps it's similar to, Abraham pleading for Sodom and Gomorrah, for the sake of the believing Jews. And I don't mean Jews for Jesus. I don't mean one for Israel. I don't know that, it could be some people that are in those groups. But the point is, there is, I believe, a remnant that is both legitimate, traceable, that God knows that they are in fact, stock of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob on the one hand, and also they are people, they've been regenerated by the Holy Spirit. They're both those things. And that's awesome. Like that's a miracle that God does that. Again, this is not, if we view the gospel message as something that there's a salesman on the corner giving stuff away, and he hands it to you, and you have to oh, do I want it or do I not? And then the decision is not in the side of the consumer. Isaac, did Isaac have a choice of being a covenant member or not? Well, I don't think so, because if you read Genesis 17, he says, no, not Ishmael. Sarah herself is going to bear you a son a year from now, and you're going to call him Isaac, and I'm going to continue my covenant through him and his seed after him. Okay, some people don't like to hear this. God did not consult Isaac. He didn't even exist yet in terms of, Isaac didn't exist in the world. And God said, yeah, this is what you are. And this is what Paul calls a child of promise. And in Galatians, Paul makes it clear that if you belong to Messiah, you're a child of promise. You're like Isaac. All believers are like Isaac. We are, in John chapter 1, he says here's another way to think of it. Who were born not by the will of man, not by blood, right? But by God. They were born from above by God. That's being a child of promise. That is a way of thinking of, a way of understanding the world that's very different than, we need to, you got to convince people. You got to convince people to accept Jesus into their heart. Otherwise, you're going to go to hell. And then you're going to go to heaven. You're going to be sad because you missed that opportunity. There's that kind of rhetoric inside the church. So, and back to, I'm glad you mentioned Romans 11. Romans 9 is another great passage.
Right.
Why is Paul praying for Israel? Why does his heart ache? Why is his heart broken? Well, and he says, to them belong to whom are the fathers and the covenants and the priesthood, right? But they're not. The nation is not saved. Christians shouldn't look at the state of Israel and go, "Oh wow, look, they're the apple of God's eye. Look at that, they're saved." Don't whatever you don't tell them about Christ, because that'll cause them to stumble. Right? There's some churches that get into that. And then there's messianic, quote, Jewish rabbis, whatever the heck that is, that stand up and try to say, they try to stand between and tell Christians what to do on one hand. And then they say, they try to control traffic of like what you can and cannot say to Jews. And they try to say, oh, there are two covenants, or who is it? Kinzer says, well, the Jewish no to Jesus is their yes to God, or like you see like just some twisted thoughts that are pushed out there in the larger Messianic Jewish official institution world, that ordains their rabbis and everything.
Continue listening to this conversation by clicking the full show link on the left side of your screen, or check out the video on the right that YouTube thinks you'll like. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you never miss content from Messiah Matters.